Hello, everyone. Welcome to the President's Live Briefing. We have about 170 people registered to join us today. I'll remind you that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A as President Lemons and our other cabinet members start to speak. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Lemons.
Thank you, Joshunda. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today for this live briefing. Joining us today again are Provost Nwosu and Vice President Rotolo. I'll give you an update and then we will spend the rest of this briefing answering questions. So we don't have formal presentations for today. So if you have questions, be sure to get them into the chat so we can respond to them. I wanted to start out by just acknowledging the day, August 6th. It's Hiroshima Day. It's the 75th anniversary, actually, of the nuclear assault that took place in Hiroshima early in the morning. It immediately killed 80,000 people, and of course, tens of thousands died later from radiation exposure. And then 3 days later, there was the second bombing of Nagasaki, killing around 40,000 people. There are, amazingly enough, still about 136,000 survivors of the Hiroshima attack, and they have a name for them. They're hibakusha. They gather usually on this date at the Peace Park in Hiroshima, and they commemorate it. This would have been a special day, of course, the 75th anniversary. COVID-19 has prevented them from gathering today. Just a few were able to do that. The New York Times had a report about it today in the print version of the paper, and one of the things that struck me about that report was just what is the current state of nuclear weaponization around the world. On the face of it, we're in a better position than we were. There were about 70,000 nuclear weapons in the mid-'80s, and now there are 13,000. But of course, we all know that in recent years, India and Pakistan and North Korea have become nuclear armed powers. China has expanded its arsenal. And in the most important thing, the Time notes, is the United States and Russia have by far the largest nuclear arsenals, have also begun to back away from treaties that had been developed with great difficulty after the Cold War ended. So the only kind of bright spot on the treaty front is that in 2017, the United Nations General Assembly did pass a prohibition of nuclear weapons treaty. It's been signed by 40 of the 50 countries that are needed for it to go into effect. But it is a very steep climb for those last 10 countries. That treaty was really passed after the efforts of survivor groups in Japan and other groups that lobbied for literally decades for that treaty. Some of you may have connections to victims or survivors of those two bombings. My only connection is my father, who was a 19-year-old Navy private whose aircraft carrier visited Nagasaki only weeks after it was bombed. He described to me what he saw in vivid detail. I still very clearly remember that, hearing him talk about that. I visited the Hiroshima Peace Park, and my experience there was really pretty profound. You can't really be there and not be impressed, one, by the magnitude and the singularity of what happened, and also the different perspective that there is there in Japan as opposed to the perspective in the US. The explosion yesterday in Beirut really made me think about that and what we have learned since that explosion. We think is that that danger down there in the harbor in Beirut was known for a number of years, and it wasn't addressed. And I couldn't help but relate it to today, August 6th, and the nuclear threat that still hangs over us, and the fact that we have known that threat for decades, but we also are largely ignoring that threat. But let's hope that sometime in the future the U.S. will lead the world in reducing the extent of that threat to human society. Now, closer to home, let's turn to a few things that I would like to update you about. First of all, I wanted to, of course, give you what I can about a budget update, and then I want to talk about a component of that. So overall, the Board of Trustees will not be passing a budget until they feel they have the needed elements to do that. Once the congressional stimulus package is passed, in whatever form that is, New York State and New York City will be analyzing it. They will be making adjustments in their budgets, and after that happens, the board will have what it needs to go ahead and then pass our budget. And the rest, I'm sure you know very well, the amount of direct aid to higher education that's in the House bill, it's in the Senate bill, the non-existence of state and local aid in the Senate bill. So we watch that and we will see what happens. The consequences are that we are really going month to month in terms of the funds that are being allocated to us by the central administration. And of course, that's causing a lot of complications, which are really unfortunate for us just in the logistics of going from month to month with keeping people on the payroll, paying for contracts and other things, particularly as we roll into the fall term. But I want to thank everybody for all the efforts that you've made. We're doing it and we'll continue to do what we need to do. As you know, the hiring freeze is a major part of what has happened at the board level, and well, actually it's really at the state level. But Chair Thompson of the CUNY board is also on the Financial Control Board for New York City, and has been very clear that the CUNY board will not take action until all the budget parameters are known, and as a part of that will not be hiring anyone. So you know that all of the hires that were put before the board at its last meeting were tabled. So I wanted to go into a little more detail then about how we're responding to the whole hiring situation and the process that we have. So there are two, well, no, I really can't say. I was going to say there are two levels, but as you will see, there are far more than two levels. At Lehman College, we have two primary review committees that are reviewing all potential hires that we are putting forward as possible exceptions to the hiring freeze. And one of those is the Academic Review Committee, and so as it says, it's reviewing all the faculty staff appointments on the academic part of the college. And then there's the Administrative Review Committee, which is reviewing all the other ones. Those two committees then pass forward the hires that they believe will meet, will be justified sufficiently to meet the parameters set by the CUNY committee. Those are finalized by the Lehman Vacancy Review Committee, which is the overall committee. That committee then forwards those recommendations to me, and then I pass those recommendations along to the CUNY VRB, which is it's the CUNY, the overall CUNY Review Board. So the CUNY Vacancy Review Board, VRB, is meeting weekly, and it is going through those proposals for hiring from all of the 25 campuses. Once they approve hires, they then are forwarded to the Board of Trustees subcommittee, the Committee on Faculty, Staff, and Administration. That committee then forwards those hires on to the full board. The agendas and minutes of those two board committees, the board subcommittee and the full board, you can find on the CUNY website under the Board of Trustees. So if you want to know what's on the agenda and what are the positions that are being put forward by the committee or considered by the CFSA, the Committee for Faculty, Staff, and Administration, and then the actions of the full board, you can find all of that on the board's website. Since the end of June, Lehman College has submitted 17 positions to the CUNY VRB for approval. 6 have been approved, 1 was denied, and the others are pending. I do know that there's a backlog at the CUNY VRB level, partly because they are receiving second and third submissions from denials of hiring that are coming back to them. The justifications they are looking for in order for an exemption from the hiring freeze are, does the position represent a salary savings due either to it being a lower salary than the previous person holding the position? Is it a consolidation of positions? Is it less costly on the instruction side, for instance, or student services than alternatives that we really have to provide? So those are the justifications that are considered. But as I said, just because the CUNY Vacancy Review Board forwards those on does not necessarily mean that they will be approved. So we're very much in a process that is still new in operation, and where in some ways the circumstances and the parameters aren't entirely fixed. So we are doing what we can. We have been very careful to prepare justifications for the positions that we're putting forward, which we feel meet the criteria and we are convinced are really essential for the college. So that's where we stand on that process. And just one other thing I didn't mention is that at the board level, they have made it clear that they will approve interim appointments for ECP positions only. And so other appointments coming through at that level will not be approved as permanent appointments until there's a budget. And I think our best estimate right now is that we probably won't have a full board approved budget and possibly until its October meeting. It could happen sooner. And of course the board has called a number of special meetings and they may do that again. Hopefully they will once there's news from Washington and the state. But that would be possibly when that would happen. Or possibly later. I think those of us that have tried to predict what will happen, I think, have been disappointed in what we hoped would happen enough times to be very cautious about making any kind of firm judgments about when this might happen. And also we don't know, of course, the magnitude of what might happen. So we are still very much waiting. Wanted to say one other thing that's related to the budget again, and that's the CARES Act. I've talked about that in previous briefings. We were one of the first universities in the entire country to distribute CARES Act funds directly to students. That happened on May 22. The $132 million of the CARES Act that is allocated directly to the campuses was submitted to the state. The plan for that, it prioritized student support and mental health services, reimbursement to the campuses for COVID-19 related expenses, and also investments in online infrastructure and training. Thinking is that the student-centered way of allocating those funds would promote maintenance of our enrollment and help sustain our students and their academic momentum. That plan was approved by the state, but the use of those funds is being postponed again until our entire budget situation is clear, the budget process is completed. So we are still waiting, and we will be. This is another thing now that is really backed up behind having the budget finalized. So that's the update on the budget, and that really is all that I know and all I can tell you about it. So going forward, just checking to make sure that I still have internet access. I seem to. You may notice that the lights are going on and off. So I wanted to answer a question that came up last week, which is around TAP and I'm going to turn off a light here. Around TAP and the issue that students are having with getting access to information about their TAP. If students have applied for TAP and have already been processed by HESC, that's the state agency that handles the tuition assistance program, but they have not submitted their verification documents, and that's excluding citizenship documentation, or financial aid has not yet processed verification documents, the TAP still remains to be packaged. We have around 3,400 students with initial TAP for the fall term, totaling about $5.6 million. But we know that there are still students who have not received TAP because they don't meet all of the TAP criteria. They may not be registered full-time, or the courses they're registered for, in fact, do not show those courses to count towards a major or a minor degree. And remember, that's one of those important criteria that was added a few years ago. And so those courses have to, all of them have to be required for the degree for them to be TAP eligible. So if there are questions about TAP, there's an email address. We'll include it in a follow-up email to this briefing. It's tap.audit@lehman.cuny.edu, but we'll include that for further questions about that. So in light of the COVID-19 crisis, wanted to get into one of the other things that has been a fairly recent development, and that is the suspending of the use of standardized tests, including the SAT and ACT, in evaluating undergraduates for admission for spring 2021, fall 2021, and summer 2022. I believe that's supposed to be, no, that's right. It is spring 2022, not summer 2022. So the main reason that this is happening is because of the risk to students who try to take these standardized tests by having to go to a site to take them where they might put themselves at risk of being exposed to the virus. So that is the primary reason that this is being done. But we all know that far before COVID-19, there was exploration that was underway about changing or eliminating the use of standardized exams for admissions. GPA alone is about 6.6 times a better predictor of student success than the SAT alone. So in the proficiency index that community colleges are using at CUNY, for instance, the SAT only has about a 5 to 6% weighting anyway. Today, the central office had a meeting with our college enrollment management managers, and they discussed the alternate to the SAT and the ACT in the indices that are being used for admissions. Colleges can develop their own approaches to how they want to handle admissions criteria without those standardized exams. Those, of course, have both administrative input and also the necessary faculty input. So that is unfolding, but I think it's important to remember that right now what we're doing is temporary. It's very COVID-19 specific, and what happens after that we will see. Just a word on enrollment for the fall term. Overall, CUNY is down about 4.2% at this point. And so I think there's still a lot of uncertainty at CUNY and at Lehman College. Interestingly enough, CUNY has over 50,000 sections listed online, course sections, and only 1.9% of those are in-person courses. So, we were thinking 90% might be courses that were not in person, but clearly it's a much higher percentage than that. So overall then, CUNY is only 0.4% below the number of courses that it was last year. So the last thing, I think that I was with you until I got through the enrollment report, but I want to just mention one final thing, which is a deadline that is coming up next week, and that is to complete the training for workplace violence prevention, and also the employee sexual misconduct prevention and response course, eSpark. Both of those are on Blackboard. You can access them through there, and if you're, please contact HR if you're having trouble finding that, but there have been a number of emails that have gone out to the campus about it. It's using your CUNY First username and password to get into Blackboard. So be sure that you've done that. And now what we'll do is we will open up for responding to questions. And I'm looking to, I've just got the chat open here. And we'll go to, actually, before we do that, let me just see if there's anything, Provost Nwosu or Vice President Rotolo, is there anything that you wanted to say, update that might be important before we go into questions?
I would just like to add an update on the budget. We did receive another allocation for the month of August, and the OTPS is sufficient for us to start distributing partial budgets to departments. So over the next few weeks, you should start to see funding in your budget for that. That's all we have on the budget, unfortunately, at this point.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll add, Mr. President, that we did, and Rene can add to this as well, we did complete the college's reopening plan. That plan has gone to CUNY. It was done yesterday, earlier part of the week. The phase 2 task force did review that plan. It had already been reviewed by the phase 1 task force. So we're in good shape as we continue to plan for fall reopening.
Excellent, thank you. So the first question that we have is related to that reopening. And I think it's a really good question for us to dig into today in this session, given that some schools around the states have opened their classrooms and then they've had subsequently found that there have been the spread of infections with staff, faculty, students coming into those classrooms. Are we having any second thoughts about having classes on campus? I'm going to respond to that first, and then I'll ask Vice President Rotolo and Provost Nwosu both to respond if they would like. That is a really excellent question. It's an even better question for Mayor de Blasio, I think. And of course, it's been probably the largest difficult question that we've been dealing with across the country with COVID-19, because everybody's impacted, almost everybody. So what does it mean on Lehman campus and what are the possibilities? First of all, as I noted, the CUNY-wide percentage, the percentage of classes that are on campus also very, very low. So first of all, we won't have very many students on campus to start with. Second thing is, those classes that will be on campus are being arranged physically and logistically in a way that we have really reduced any possible exposure between students and staff and faculty who will be participating in those classes. It's not zero, but it is very, very low, starting with the fact that everyone who comes onto campus now and into the fall term will have to first of all have done a pre-screening. And so in order to even come on campus, they'll have to present the results of that pre-screening to security as they're coming through just the few number of gates that will be open. So that is our first point of control in terms of who's coming on campus. Screening, of course, does not mean that someone who is asymptomatic or simply doesn't fill out the screen correctly and is infectious will be on campus. That can very well happen. Maybe what's happened in some of these schools where that is where they've had these now infections that have arisen as a result. That is our first line. The next line of defense in terms of spread of infection is when those students come onto campus and the faculty come onto campus and the staff that are supporting them come onto campus, their physical spaces are being arranged in a way that we really can reduce any possibility of infection happening between individuals. Part of that is physical arrangement of classrooms. Part of that is a 100% insistence on wearing masks. There will be no exception to that, and you simply cannot come to campus if you don't wear a mask, with some very small possible exception for someone who physically cannot do that for health reasons. And in that case, those individuals will have an alternative to a mask that they will use, but there will be a physical barrier at the minimum. So those are precautions, among others, including having ample hand cleaning stations around with hand sanitizer, and just the flow of traffic, the flow of the way that people are moving around campus. It will be a very small number of people on campus at any given time, and that again that's really the key to not having the college become an example of what's mentioned in this question. I mean, if you've watched what's happened around the country with schools opening in Indiana and other places, you know also that the density of those students coming in is way higher than what we're talking about. They may be having some physical distancing, but what I've seen is nothing like what we're going to see at Lehman College. Our goal has been to be very conservative about what we have on campus, the activities that we have, and that as we have more activity on campus and more people on campus, that we do it in a very controlled way. We observe what's happening. We make sure that we don't lose control anywhere along the way so that we can really contain the possibility of having the spread of the virus. So I know I'm probably as worried as anybody is about how this plays out on campus, and I feel very confident about the way we have approached this and about the plan that we have now submitted to the central administration about how we handle phase 1 and phase 2. So Vice President Rotolo, why don't you also respond?
Sure. So I don't know if anyone recalls, but we had sent out a survey as part of our process of developing the plan to get a sense on how departments were functioning off campus. And we received 94 departmental responses. And in all of cases, they said that they were functioning very well off campus, that they could continue to function completely off campus, and that they would have minimal need to be on campus for very specific functions. Some of those specific functions are to receive mail. So weekly, and this has been going on all along, weekly someone will come in, get the mail, process the mail. Process checks. This has been going on all along as well. Students will mail in their payments. Other things that have to be done in the office that people are having problems doing at home. So it's been very limited access. It's been scheduled access. And the same is true with classes. We've worked closely with the faculty who felt it necessary that part of their class had to take place on campus. I'll give you some brief examples. For ceramics, the students will be working at home, but they need to have their work fired, so they need to come onto campus. It'll be scheduled, it'll be staggered. They'll come in, they'll drop off their work to be fired, and then they'll arrange again to come back and pick it all up. Where we're having a class in a classroom or a lab setting, they're working with 25% or a third of the people actually in the room. So a lab that will normally handle 24 students will have between 4 and 6 students. So it's greatly reduced numbers, it's staggered, and it's for very limited times, very limited functions.
I will add to that that if you really look at the number of courses or sections we're offering for fall, that's 3,069 courses, sections. And if you really look at that totality and the number that we have to come to campus, it's really, really very, very minimal. And even in that instance as well, it is also what I called last week a modified on-site presence on campus. And what we've tried to do is really to allow for those courses where we believe very strongly that they are bottleneck courses as best as possible in order to allow students to make progress towards their degree without, of course, jeopardizing health and safety concerns. And that's why this has taken a lot of time, a lot of work with department chairs, with deans, with faculty concerned. And in many instances in those conversations that VP Rotolo has had with the senior registrar, with the faculty members, and explained the circumstances and the issues around having to have an on-site presence, then of course we've had a rethinking of that initial desire. And so this has been a very thoughtful approach we've taken to address what we consider to be the most appropriate approach to returning, so that what the president mentioned, we continue to see as the most important for us, the health and safety of members of our campus community. There will be instances where students have to come in hybrid courses. We also have a very, very low percentage in that regard as well, 8% of those courses. So most of the classes will still be online. And where we can, then we will accommodate on-site presence. The library also would have limited arrangements that's been put in place by the chief librarian. It doesn't require students to come on campus. There will be limited staffing to continue to provide support services. As I mentioned again last week, what we've asked our faculty members to work very closely with the library in terms of electronic materials that they would need for those classes, so that arrangements are made on time before we return to campus. So that work is also going on as well.
Great, thank you both for adding to that. And one thing I would just add, because I think that's very accurate to say this has been a very careful, deliberative process, and also has included the range of stakeholders on campus, so that there's input from all the important groups of stakeholders that need to be there. There was a question about these plans, will they be available? And yes, they will. As soon as those plans are approved by the central administration, they will be up on our website in total. So everything about them will be up there. We're not going to put them up until they're approved, because there may be some feedback or suggestions that will come back that we'll need to incorporate, and we don't want to make it confusing. So we will, but as soon as we have approval, and right now the central administration is saying 4 to 5 days, 4 to 5 business days is kind of the outside to get them approved. So hopefully that will be the case, and we'll be able to have those up our plan up next week. There's a question that about course delivery, very interesting question, and Provost, I think you'll want to respond to this question about, is it possible that online learning will be adopted more widely as a standard way to deliver courses beyond COVID-19?
That's an excellent question. That's actually has been one that chief academic officers, everyone has been grappling with nationally. The question really, have we learned lessons that we can deploy as we go beyond COVID-19? Yes, we have. Have we learned lessons that would impact how we deliver instruction? Yes, we have. Have we learned lessons that would impact how we deliver even support services? Yes, we have. You know, it used to be part of the challenge if students had said, well, I can't really come to campus today for financial aid support, and we'll say, oh, you have to come to campus. I think those days will be gone. What this experience has taught us, or at least will be for us, is that we will have to rethink how we deliver our services in a way that serves the needs of our population. We will also have to rethink how we deliver instruction in a way that also serves a maximum number of students. And so those are conversations we'll continue to have on campus. We had actually been on this pathway to increase our online presence, to be able to serve larger members of our community. What this has actually done for us is that it has enhanced our ability to do so. And so we will be looking at additional degree programs that we could potentially be moving to online as well in order to address those needs. So this is really, as bad as this has been, it is also an opportunity for us to learn lessons to help advance our institutional mission.
Thank you. Yeah, I had an interesting discussion with Senator Sepulveda this morning, and he was making the same point. He wondered how we were doing and how the fall was looking, but he was making the point that as difficult as all this has been, there are some silver linings here. There are things that we're learning that are really going to help us going forward. And we wouldn't really wish this pandemic on ourselves in any way, but there will be some things that we're going to benefit from it, and we're going to learn. So I'm not seeing other questions coming in. If there's something that you want to ask, get it in the next minute or two. Anything, Vice President Rotolo or Provost Nwosu, is there anything else that you can think of that we might want to touch on this afternoon?
I think you mentioned, President Lemons, the enrollment numbers as of this afternoon. What whilst we continue to track progress, I do want to underscore the very fact that we did pretty well with summer, and to thank our enrollment management team and all of our colleagues across the campus for the work everybody did to ensure we have that robust enrollment. So that will be very, very helpful for us as an institution. Would have also implications for us in terms of our budget. And the work we're really doing for fall is also geared towards that direction. A 1% increase above what we were from last year in terms of the numbers for today. We continue to see significant improvement in terms of full-time, first-time freshman enrollment numbers. They're up. As of yesterday, it was about 9% in terms of where we, in fact, above our target. We also see some improvement with regard to graduate enrollment. Those improvements we also saw with summer numbers, and we believe we'll be doing well in those two regards. Where we are also working extremely hard is on the transfer numbers as well. So if we continue along the path that we are moving, the goal still remains for a flat enrollment. If all things go well, perhaps above that. As of today, headcount is almost 13,000 students, and the goal for us is 15,000 plus students for fall. So we're making some good progress. We still have some time before the start of the semester, but that's just the update for today in terms of numbers.
Great, thank you. A couple questions have come in, and these are very practical questions, and I think maybe Vice President Rotolo, you can probably give us some insight on one of them. How will new students receive ID cards?
Well, students have the ability to send photos in and get an electronic version of an ID card, which they can show on their phone. The other option is if they send in a photo, we can print and mail to them the actual ID card if they need that.
Great. There's a question about mental health services that might be available because of funding from the CARES Act. And the part of what the university did in working on the response to COVID-19 and the task force, one of the areas was mental health and student wellness. And there's been an ongoing effort as a result of that, and it's going on before that task force, to look at the services that we are able to provide to students and how those could be expanded. And maybe what we will want to do is, in a subsequent session, ask our Dean of Students, Stanley Bazile, to come and give more information about that, because that's a really important question. And one of the things we've tried to do is keep the website up to date in terms of how to access those resources. But we've all been aware that the stress of the last 6 months has had a huge impact, not only on students, but also on staff and on faculty. And so there's a real need for as much access to mental health services as possible. So I think what we'll defer the specific answer to that to a later session, unless Provost, is there anything you want to add to that at this point?
I was going to also say that there are a number of support services that also been developed by Student Affairs that we will add to that conversation on mental health as well. There was also a question raised about registering clubs. That too can be addressed at that meeting as well. Today I did send out a memo to students. You talked about the CARES Act, the additional discretionary money that we did receive from the central office, and financial aid worked in terms of identifying students who qualify for those more than 2,000 students. The letter went out to them, and they would receive those funds automatically, about $470 per student for those who qualified for that reason. There was also another memo we sent out to students about additional resources to help prepare them for learning in the online environment. That memo went out early part of this week, and we'll continue to send reminders to students about additional technical resources that they would need to be able to prepare for fall as well.
Great.
And I'll just add to that, for faculty and staff, there are services available to them through the HR department, so they can reach out to human.resources@lehman.cuny.edu to ask for that assistance.
Thank you. And the funding that the Provost is mentioning is funding that is it's part of the mostly the direct allocation to the college for that half of the CARES Act funding that was direct to students, not to the institution. And then there was some additional funding also in that half of the CARES Act funding that came through additionally. So that funding has been released. That's the funding that was mostly allocated and released in May, but we had this extra amount. Another question came in is about what students do who cannot take courses synchronously because of work schedules that may have been altered because of COVID-19, where the coursework that's online is not being asynchronous or not entirely asynchronous. Provost, is there anything that you could say about that?
That's an excellent question, and I saw that earlier. What I would recommend to the students in those particular instances is to work very closely with the faculty and the department chair, because there will be combinations of this. And so if that's the case, the delivery modality for that particular course, then I would ask them to reach out to their faculty member to work out a plan for how they will address that particular issue. So we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis, but it's important for the student to reach out to the faculty member and or the department chair.
Thank you. Well, we're close to our hour. We don't have any other questions that have come in. So I think we will close at this point. I want to thank, again, each of you for coming today. Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Vice President Rotolo, for once again making yourselves available. I think it's very helpful to have you here and to address these questions that are coming up. And again, if you have questions before the next session, be sure to email them in. That sometimes gives us time to prepare a little more specific answer than we might be able to do if it just comes in during the session. But thank you again to everyone. Have a good evening. I hope your power stays on.
Or comes back if you don't have it.
Or comes back. Mine hasn't.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.